I'm a technology marketing commentator. I've worked in the mainframe and modernization space for over 3 decades now. But I'm now a freelancer, so I offer advice and guidance and marketing services, strategic services to a range of clients. I'm very pleased to be at Share with a couple of my clients, but meeting some old friends as well. I've been to Share a number of times. We all want to grow up to be mainframers. My first job actually in 1991, the first thing I did was log in through a green screen system to my company's mainframe. I didn't even know they had one when I took the job. I joined as a COBOL programmer, and soon enough I was writing COBOL compilers that ran on mainframes and elsewhere. So I jumped in pretty early, and I've stayed in and around the industry for, well, ever since. Well, I think what's interesting about the mainframe industry is that it has evolved in the sense of significant change has happened over that time, certainly in my career lifespan. But from the outside in, it looks somewhat glacial. It looks somewhat staid and conservative. And that's part of the challenge I think the mainframe industry faces as it looks to recruit, the next generation of mainframers into its ranks. And that's also true for some of the technologies within the mainframe space as well. But actually, if you look at what's going on this week at Share, you can't move for discussions about how generative AI, for example, is causing a seismic shift into how mainframe services are delivered and how businesses can make use of that. And I'm actually very impressed with the amount of innovation. I was lucky enough to attend the Tech Field Day event this week within Share, where some of the vendors showcase some of their new innovations that is coming down the road for them on their roadmap. It's pretty staggering what's achievable now. And if you look at the mainframe and compare it with the non-mainframe technology space, actually a number of the things that you typically associate with non-mainframe environments, such as the variety of choice of languages that you can use, the level of effort that's gone into the security side of things, but even things like containerization, language choices, DevOps, all of that's equally available in the mainframe world, but it just doesn't really have the reputation for that, and it still suffers from that perception problem. So it's really good to see what the vendors are doing and the community's doing at large to sort of, to buck that trend and say, well, no, wait a second, it's just another platform. And I think that's a good way to look at the mainframe. Well, I'm probably going to be called a bit of a heretic here for suggesting this, but I think the jury is still out on precisely how and how deep the impact of Gen AI and AI and later variants of the concept of artificial intelligence are going to benefit the wider business world. I think that's equally true outside of the mainframe as it is within the mainframe. But what I do notice is there are individual use cases, and again, I've seen this from a couple of vendors that I've spoken to this week, where they've looked really, really carefully at what their customers are trying to do and where the bottlenecks are in their day job, and then look to how AI or AI-related technology can, be used to leverage, to accelerate, to improve individual use cases, piece by piece. And so rather than looking at AI as this sort of, silver bullet for everything, it's no panacea at all. You're going to have to be very, very specific about how AI is going to help you. And it looks like people have been very sensible, from what I've seen at Share, but elsewhere, in terms of who is it that's doing their day job? What are they struggling to achieve? And how can something like AI be sort of sprinkled on top of what they're currently doing to accelerate what they can achieve? So there are a number of examples that I've seen this week, and of course some of them are pre-GA, they haven't been launched yet. So I've got some sort of, some insight into what's coming down the road. And I'm pretty excited to see what the vendors will be coming up with in the next year or so. Well, I think there are two important aspects to this. I think it's almost a given if you're in the mainframe space, and again, it's a relatively closed community if you're looking at it from the outside. But what's, I think, important is that there's so much technology innovation. The mainframe itself is a staggering piece of kit. The Z16 is an absolutely phenomenal piece of kit, and it's no surprise to me personally that IBM has done so well in revenue terms, at least with the success of the Z16. But on the top of that, the things that you can do on the mainframe now, just compared to 5 or 10 years ago, is nothing short of astonishing. It's almost a given for me personally, just how much technical innovation is going on in the mainframe space. And I don't expect that to slow down. I expect that to actually accelerate. And again, AI will probably be a platform for that. But I think more than that, how the mainframe is evolving, and again, it's already been happening over the last decade or so, but how it must continue to evolve is in terms of the perception of it in the outside world. And there are a couple of things about that. One of which is, are there sufficient numbers of people coming into the mainframe world that can do its bidding, that can evangelize for the mainframe, but can actually be the technical people and the leaders and the decision makers in the future for the mainframe community? And so that's a skills question. I think the skills question is being well discussed. It's a debate that's happening in public now. I think that was vital, and I think that needs to continue to accelerate, because without that next generation, none of this is possible. It doesn't matter how good the tech is. If you don't have operators, if you don't have skilled technicians, the whole thing will dry up. And I think everyone knows that. But I think if you look at what the future of the mainframe is, it has to be seen as just another platform. I borrowed that phrase from a vendor who used it. It was just a throwaway comment, and I thought, well, that's a brilliant way of describing it. It's just another swim lane for IT delivery in a business context. And I think it has to sit alongside, and it has to be connected with the rest of the enterprise, which I think is happening really well in some organizations that I speak to. In other organizations that I speak to, the mainframe isn't even in the same city, let alone the same building, and nor are the teams, as the rest of the IT organization. And I think we have to build bridges for those things to come together for the true value of what will ultimately be a hybrid solution for all businesses going forward, let's face it, in the future. Like I say, I'm lucky enough to speak individually to end user organizations who have large, huge mainframe estates, thousands and thousands of COBOL applications. And I talk to them about a skills challenge, and I talk to them about the concerns that the rest of the industry has. And they just flat out laugh at me, and they said, we don't have that problem at all. So I'm like, well, how have you addressed that? You must have considered it. And they're like, well, yeah, we considered it years and years ago, decades ago. It's a strategic, IT leadership and HR question. Do we have the right people today, but also will we have the right people in 10 years' time to support the work that we're doing to support our business? And in a large number of the significant industries, significant vertical industries such as banking and insurance, for example, you have to have 5 and 10 year plans for the products that you're developing and taking to market. And of course, much of that is IT based. So I talk to some clients and they're like, we have our own training program, we have a regular intake of graduates or regular intake of school leavers, and we train them up. And we have, well-trained, dedicated, and loyal staff who are well-trained, well looked after, and work in an environment that is progressive and innovative. On the flip side, there are organizations that haven't done that, or that have failed to have sufficient funding or strategic direction to do that. And they are struggling, and they are having to find shortcut ways to make up the shortfall of the resources that they need. And it's to solve the challenges that they face that you see a growing supply chain of educators and training organizations that are sort of plugging that gap. And that's been working, again, tremendously well in the mainframe space. The vendors have encouraged it, have promoted it. There are skills promotion initiatives in play that have been for a number of years. But if you look at, I don't want to name drop too many people, but if you look at people like Jeff Decker and Cam Say and Darren Search at Interskill, these are pioneering individuals who are saying, look, there's a supply and demand challenge, but we can provide fresh demand. We just need to all come together as a team and say, right, well, how are we going to supply that shortfall? And actually the number of training programs and a number of people who've been put through those apprenticeships and training programs is greatly encouraging. Now, I would add, with something like a skills challenge, you're never done, because more people retire every year. And so you have a basic economic question, a basic math question of, right, well, do we have the right number of people coming on board? And remember, training someone up as a first-year graduate intake programmer, they don't automatically become a seasoned, business-savvy senior technician. That's a decades-long journey for them. So, you've got to plan ahead, but people are planning ahead. I think the most crucial thing of all of this is that the skills discussion is taking place in the public domain. If it wasn't, I think we would have bigger problems. The fact that it now is means that there aren't many organizations who I speak to who are sort of ignorant of the challenge, and therefore they're all doing something. Some are a bit further behind us. Well, I think once upon a time, the relationship between academia and business, when it came to mainframe technology, when it came to mainframe technologies such as the COBOL programming language, for example, there were a vast number of universities that would teach mainframe skills, that would teach COBOL skills. If that were back to where it was in the, late 70s and early 80s, I'm not sure we'd even be having this conversation. So if I had a magic wand, and who's to say I don't, by the way, I just don't use it for this purpose. If I had a magic wand, I would probably take the level of relationship between academia and business back to a bygone era where there were closer connections to say, look, if you train up these people, I will hire them. Academia, a lot of universities, their reasons for adding certain things onto the curriculum are not necessarily based on what the local employer wants. They're based on something else. I don't know what that is, but I would go back to before that changed. Well, let's just reinforce the point that it does still matter, obviously, because you walk around the halls and you see some of the sessions here this week at Share, and a number of other conferences in the mainframe space. COBOL still matters because organizations are looking to supply additional tools and facilities and capability to users, to programmers who are using COBOL every day. So, there's a demand for extra stuff to help them do their jobs better. And what facilities are they being offered? Well, I don't want to be too specific, but programmers are being given extra facilities to understand what a COBOL application does. Or what's interesting about most COBOL programmers is they're not maintaining code that they wrote. These COBOL systems have been around probably since before they were, even in the industry. Most COBOL applications have outlived any reasonable expectation of their tenure, and COBOL itself is going to be 65 years old this year. So it's no surprise, perhaps, that there's a challenge with, well, these old applications, I don't really know what they do. I'm trying to cut someone else's code. I don't really know what it does. It's a bit scary. And although COBOL is fascinating to look at and it's very easy to read, anyone can pick COBOL up in no time at all. When you're reading someone else's code and the size of the applications, remember these applications are running the world economy. They're doing huge, important things, shifting money around, massive calculations of vital business components. So they're vast in their size. You're not suddenly just going to look at a million lines of code and understand what it does, regardless of the language. So the facilities to help you do that job better, including things that Gen AI are bringing to the party, and other innovations. It's no surprise that COBOL remains on people's lips, because it remains an important consideration of application delivery. Now, what I would say is COBOL, not unlike the mainframe, also suffers from something of an existential challenge, which is that most college kids don't learn COBOL as they start their journey into the industry. So the accepted wisdom for most entry-level graduate IT people is that COBOL isn't an important language, isn't necessary, and yet COBOL accounts for more, depends on how you want to measure it, but COBOL accounts for, a far greater level of importance to the economy than anyone would give it credit for. And therefore, to not have COBOL programmers supporting your business into the future is something of an existential crisis for the businesses that still use COBOL. People are saying, well, we can just translate it, we can just move away and spit out something else. Well, it doesn't necessarily fix anything, simply because all you have is another application that's equally vast, equally incomprehensible, and not written by your own hands, that is equally hard to maintain. And in fact, any other language is harder to maintain line by line than COBOL is, because COBOL is easy to read and most of the other languages are based on hieroglyphics. And so you have to be something of an expert in coding to actually pick up that kind of language. I'm not saying COBOL's a better language than anything else, but I am suggesting that you have to think very, very carefully before you think that translating from COBOL into something else is some sort of silver bullet, because it won't be. You'll just inherit another mess that is equally hard to maintain. So the smarter organizations that I'm speaking to, they're saying, well, what is it we need our systems to do? What do we need to modernize our business to achieve? And then what's the right way to use technology to achieve that goal? And that might involve changing COBOL into something else. But I would add, and I would underscore this, it might not. It might actually mean, well, that's perfectly good at what it does. What you really need is better tooling, more skilled people, and a clearer appreciation of how that application is working and how it can work better in the future. And there's tools on the market, and there's some fantastic examples here this week of the things that you can now do in COBOL that you would find very hard to do 10 or 20 years ago. That makes those jobs a lot easier, and you can deliver applications on the mainframes far faster nowadays than you could ever do, back in my day. Yeah, so COBOL differentiates itself from the majority of other popular languages, such as C or Java. They're probably the best two examples, but C++, C# as well, in that the originators of COBOL, and we're going back a very long time, all of the records were, literally handwritten on paper in the 50s. So, we've done the studies, and we understood that the people who designed COBOL in the first place, remember, there was no such thing as a computer programmer in the 1950s. There was no such thing as IT in the 1950s. It was the term data processing wasn't even invented by then. So the committee that presided over the creation of COBOL said, what we have to do is build a language to allow people to tell the computer what to do, and the people who are doing that have no technical skill. So we have to train people who currently are secretaries or people who work in the finance department to then sit and type away and tell the computer what to do. So crucially, they said the thing that we're going to have to do is make it look as much like English as possible, and as structured and as, frankly, idiot-proof as possible. So you read COBOL line by line. If you want to move a variable, it's the word move. If you want to add two numbers together, you use the verb add. And so things like that just don't exist in other languages. There's shortcut, shortened versions, hieroglyphic versions, a lot of symbolism in other languages that COBOL doesn't use. That's why you can pick it up and look at it and more or less immediately say, well, I'm not going to bet the farm on it, but I know I can guess what this piece of code is doing. Now, if you're looking at 1 million lines of code in any language, you haven't got a chance. You need tooling to help you understand it, to navigate through the vast monolith that you're presiding over. And there are tools to do that. But actually, sort of page by page, if you look at COBOL today, you're like, oh, well, I know what the guy was trying to do, or the lady, of course, because actually another interesting thing about COBOL is that the first wave of COBOL programmers, like I say, they were secretarial or finance staff. They were predominantly women, and COBOL was in itself designed by a committee that was full of women as well. So it's a really interesting thing that the original Women in STEM project and the original open source project, because it's not owned by any vendor, was the COBOL language.